Welcome to the Design Build Institute of America's Design Build Delivers podcast. You know, DBIA is 25 years old this year. We'll be celebrating our silver anniversary in a variety of ways, but we thought now's the perfect time to get together some long-time design builders to talk about how far the industry has come in a quarter century. I'm Kim Wright at DBIA National, and today we're going to eavesdrop on a conversation between DBIA Executive Director and CEO Lisa Washington and a couple of our organization's longtime members, instructors, volunteers, officers, board members. You get the idea. They've done it all over the years. Today we're talking about all things design build with Craig Unger, CEO of Unger Security Solutions, and Mike Loulakis with Capital Project Strategies.
Well, good morning. I'm here with Craig Unger and Mike Loulakis, two individuals that have been involved in DBIA pretty much since its inception. Two Brunelleschi winners and two of our highest ranked instructors. So welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. So let's jump right in. So Craig, I met you in 2004 when I interviewed at DBIA. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your earliest involvement with DBIA and just tell us the story. How did you get here and how did you become one of the strongest design build advocates I've ever met?
Painfully. Back in the mid to late 90s, I was with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We had a very aggressive construction schedule. We couldn't seem to keep up with the demand for more bed space. And we were struggling with design bid build, had a lot of claims and changed orders, delays, disputes, terminations, defaulted a couple of contractors over these were $100 million contracts approximately. But and then Congress passes this new law called the Clinger-Cohen Act in 96 that said we could do it, but we were a bit skeptical to jump in.
Everybody, even you, were you skeptical?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. Mike says yes. Okay.
Yes. So what you mentioned bridging dock, but once we got the statutory authority to do it, I was working with our architects and engineers, and they kept saying the next one, because we already hired A&Es that already designed the project, and it was always going to be the next one, and then we'd have another claim, and then it was going to be the next one. Then we had a mini trial in Miami that was a slugfest and drug each other over the finish line. Then was going to be the next one. We had a termination, a default. So in essence, the next one that came to my desk, I took the 100% prescriptive, detailed construction documents and just peeled off like the top 30% and said, there, that's our first. It was a camp in Forest City, Arkansas for roughly $10 million. And
you were a trailblazer.
And yeah, it was successful. We've wondered, is this something to this, or did we just get lucky? So, but that was our first initial venture into design build.
Well, Mike, your background, you're a lawyer and an engineer, right? And when I came to DBIA, I saw your name as the registered agent. So you've been involved since the very beginning of DBIA. What brought a lawyer to embrace something that was wrought with what seemed like so many potential legal liability issues?
Well, I really forgot about that registered agent thing.
Yeah.
So Jeff Beard. Well, my interest in design build really spanned into the early 80s.
Okay.
Because I was working power projects, and I was doing contract work for them, and I was doing every now and then we'd have a claim, but it was all design build. It was called EPC, as we know.
Right.
And I had then thought it was just academically interesting because you're looking at single point of responsibility and lots of uniqueness around that model versus design bid build and construction management or risk. So I started writing on it. I wrote some papers that got published, and I started speaking as we started using design build in the federal sector, kind of in the mid 80s, even though it was poorly done. There were some examples out there, and so I got to know some people. I got to know Jeff Beard. Jeff Beard had had done some great work at ASCE in terms of writing a paper and a pamphlet on design build for engineers. And so he had contacted me, getting back to the DBI connection, he had contacted me right after the first meeting of the 6 or 7 companies that decided they were going to form DBIA.
Okay.
And he took me out to lunch, he took me out with Preston. And I'd never met Preston, I didn't even know Preston. And so he took me out to lunch and he said, this is what we're thinking of doing, this is what we're going to do, and we just need somebody that's interested on the legal side, and we think you're the person. And so again, I knew him, and that got me involved in DBIA, and hence,
Excellent.
moving forward, I've just always found it to be just an interesting delivery system, and I kind of find studying delivery systems to be cool.
Excellent. So there were people out there that understood and embraced that DBIA was needed to bring those people together, it sounds like.
Absolutely. What's interesting when I look at the guys, and when Craig joined the board a little bit later, so Craig was sort of 5 years into DBI's history.
Okay.
I was kind of like a year into it, maybe a little bit before then. But those first years, those were all, if you look at our core group, they're, with the exception of one, Sverdrup, right? I mean, Craig Krakemeyer, our third president, they were all general contractors.
Right.
Two of them had in-house engineering design capabilities, Gray and Haskell, but they were general contractors focusing on buildings.
Right.
And so their view was the public sector needs to be changed because we're doing a little bit of public sector work. That led to Klinger-Cohen Act work that Craig talked about and advancing that. But there was this issue of, is it going to expand into what we call civil? Right. Civil being water, transportation, and the like, and obviously it did.
It has. That's right. So 25 years ago, there were one or two states where people were dabbling in design build, right? And then we saw it in the federal sector. Today, we're at 43 states that have either full or widespread authority for design build. That's pretty good over 25 years, but what do you think it's going to take? We'll start with Craig. What's it going to take to get design build in all 50 states full authority?
Actually, I thought it was more than 43, but it usually, and again, I'm talking from the perspective of an owner, and it's probably as much about change management as it is project delivery. And if things are working relatively well, it's hard for an agency, an owner, public or private, to make such a drastic change. And I think that's where DBIA has played and can continue to play a part, is to go in and share what border states are doing, those that don't have naming legislation, the studies that have done, and again, sharing both best practices and lessons learned. I think I work with agencies that typically are trying design build for the first time as a consultant, and I kind of help walk them through the process. And there's just a lot of skepticism about how important price should be in the selection, and how far do we advance the design? We don't know what we're getting. So there's, I think education is probably the key to more enabling legislation.
You don't know what you don't know. I'm sorry,
I'm
but
going to pile on that. I look at a place like New York, which obviously they spend a lot of money on construction, and how backwards New York was in terms of not even having general contractors do their work.
Exactly.
It's multi-prime under the WICS Act. And we still have a couple of states that are kind of like that. But New York has tried it, seems to love it, and at this point is now really embracing it. Exactly. They've got to go through this process that Craig talked about. But I think that once we start seeing some of the states that have historically been impediments to alternative delivery, and I consider construction management a risk in P3, even though we can define
under
P3,
the umbrella of integrated.
Once you start going there and seeing some good stories, it's kind of hard to not look at design build as being an option, even though it may not be the option that they prefer, but at least create an option. Right.
Yeah, and Craig, you mentioned you thought there were more than 43. I think all 50 do have some level of authority, and the 43 was the full or widely permitted I was referring to. So, Mike, you mentioned EPC earlier in the private sector. One of the challenges for DBIA has been engaging the private sector. Is EPC essentially design build, or would the private sector say it's something different?
No, EPC is design build. It's just a different nomenclature.
Okay.
If you look at the contract, it's the same. Single point of responsibility, it's the same. Generally, we thought of EPC in the industrial sector, being power, process, and the like. And frequently, it was a firm that was integrated. So you wouldn't look at a firm, even though there's exceptions to that, looking at subcontracting out engineering services to be able to do the E part of it. But it's definitely if you look at all the contractual and legal side, it's design build, and to some extent when we're looking at progressive design build as being moving forward in the public sector, that is commonly the way EPC is done
Right.
at the most sophisticated of level, where you have somebody coming in early doing that
Right.
front end package and then ultimately providing a price and schedule commitment.
Well, you mentioned progressive. As we think about DBIA moving forward, we've come far in 25 years, but now we're seeing a lot of variations on design build. We're seeing P3s that have a design build element. We are seeing progressive design build, operate, and maintain. What is DBIA's role, or what do you believe our role should be in these variations or add-ons to design build? And either one of you.
Yeah, me first on that, I guess. Well, I just find it funny. When I look at those early slides that we created, what do we call P3? It was Design Build Plus.
That's right.
Right? And we
That's
said,
right.
you can do some front-end stuff, you can
That's
do some
right.
back-end financing and O&M, but it was always design and build at the core, and then things that are related to that development process sort of expanding out. So I don't know that, and I haven't given great thought to this, but there's still a lot of importance around the design and build part of this.
Right.
And I don't know that DBIA needs to be involved heavily, if at all, on the expansion of that, right? To figure out what's the appropriate financing mechanism and dealing with that. Sometimes it's hard enough just to deal with the design and build process.
Right.
So I think that's, and all of these alternative systems that have concession require a design-build relationship, because there's project financing. Again, that goes back to the industrial world, where you're looking at plants that have to be financed, and we're looking for single point of responsibility. You can't go in and say, I can use a target price.
Exactly.
It's got to be a firm price. So
Okay.
I'd be curious.
Thoughts,
Greg's
Greg?
answer on
Well, I agree. I've had a few opportunities over the last several years to be involved with P3s, public-private partnerships, and some assume that it's always design-build. And as I assumed, they called it design-build. There was issues, and they had some potential problems, and I was asked to come in and help resolve, mediate. And I quickly determined, although it was a P3, it was for a major sensitive project for our national defense, it was developer-led. And it was, the developer held a separate contract for the design team and the general contractor. So they had no contractual relation, which is the basic essence of what design build's all about. So I think education, once again, in our training courses, you're right, we called it upstream, downstream, design, build, finance, design, build, operate, and all, and a mixture of those. But to me, we need to be careful that P3s are not automatically design build. I'll go back to Mike mentioned progressive. I find it earlier on too. We had qualifications based. There was a few states could do qualifications based, and then select design builder 100% on quals. We tried that a couple of times after the '96 Klinger Cohen Act. We had a couple of chairmen that really wanted us to run back up and have Congress provide a qualifications based selection. We were told timing was not good. But in any event, I see progressive as a great option for owners that really do want to engage the design build team much earlier, and then they're okay with a lock-in and a price subsequent to that initial selection process.
So nomenclature aside, it sounds like no matter what you call it, Lee Evey, the former CEO, used to say you could call it macaroni, but the key is team cohesion and collaboration and trust. Would you agree with that it's the way the team works together, whether it's progressive design build procured traditionally, a P3, that team collaboration and early involvement of key players is critical?
Absolutely. Again, I do a lot of, as you know, Lisa, training for DBIA, and I do consulting, and probably one of the biggest challenges I have, and I try to make the owners say, I sat in your seat. You're diminishing how critical the team is, because they seem like they'll go through phase one and they'll shortlist the 3 premier design build teams, and some will assume we just go into phase 2 and they're all equal.
Right.
I mean, the whole objective we've been trying to teach with DBIA's owner series is select the best design build team with the best proposal within budget, and that's still a struggle I see is owners fully recognizing how critical collaboration is in design build.
Excellent. So I hear a lot about what I'll call innovations in design and construction that I believe will work better in a design-build environment, but I like your perspective. For example, I hear a lot about lean principles. I hear a lot about the use of BIM or VDC, achieving sustainability goals. And there is some research to suggest that all those things work better in the design-build environment. Do you all agree with that?
Yeah, I think I do, in that the team is formed, and to be able to get the benefits of all of that integration that technology can provide, it is having a structure where at least design and construction are integrated makes sense. And then that really gets to the point of ensuring, and this is one of Craig's points, which he's taught about and lectured about. It's the idea of making sure that you have the critical trade components that are brought in here. And so when you now look at that fully integrated team done according to design build done right, having lean practices built off of that, sustainability I'll sort of put off on the side, but certainly the lean practices work very well. It's much different if you look at this and have a hierarchy where people are selected on a different basis and don't have those contractual lines tying them together, as well as the fact that they come to a team, they come to the procurement having won together, as opposed to being selected later.
Okay. Tell me a story. So you've both been involved. Well, no, let me qualify your story, Craig. I know where your story could go.
You will be able to beat some of this out, right? If it's not appropriate.
Tell me a success story. You've both been advocates for a long time. You instruct for DBIA. In your day jobs, you assist and advise owners. Tell me a success story about an owner that transitioned from traditional design bid build to design build that you were a part of, and how that made you feel.
Well, I got to start with a project in Paradise, Aloha, for my friends in Hawaii. But there's a state that tried design build many, many years ago and was not successful. They came to a DBIA conference in New Orleans. Today's Fat Tuesday, incidentally, so for Mardi Gras.
It is.
And they saw some of us speak, and I think you may be approached first, Lisa. I think I was facilitating the owners panel, and we had a couple of the Hawaii State Department of Education and their DAGS folks attend that conference, and they figured out after listening to some of our best practices that they really didn't do that, and so they wanted to try another project. So I went over and I was asked to be their owner's advisor or consultant. What do we call them now? Owner's
consultant is the umbrella term.
Is our umbrella term. But it was basically help them formulate their RFQ, RFP, work with their AE1 to develop performance requirements in the program and the narratives. And let me pause for a minute and say, at that time, Hawaii was taking about, this is their information they give me, about 7 years to bring on a new school.
Wow.
And
they had a
lot of issues and problems. Their cost was quite high, as you might imagine, in a work in the Pacific Islands. And logistics always a big issue. So I typically done a lot of consulting over the years, and our 10 best practices that Mike co-authored with Diana Hogue, usually if I can get an owner to do 7, 8 of them, I'm pleased. If they do 9, I'm spiking them all in the end zone. This is the first agency I'd ever worked with. Everything I mentioned, we need to do shortlist 3. Yep, we need to do quals. We need to disclose the budget, design build the budget. Yep, we got that. We need to pay a stipend. Yep, we got it. You need to do an incentive award. Yep, we'll do that. So I remember flying back. My wife was on that trip, and I said, "Boy, I'm really screwed now." And she said, "What do you mean? You just said they did everything you asked." I said, "Yeah, usually there's always 1 or 2. If this project goes off track, I have an off-ramp." I told you should have put ADR partnering in there, but you decided not to. I told you should have had an award fee. But in any event, all 10 of them. So the end of the story was project brought on from notice to proceed to activating commission at school, 16 months.
Wow.
Cost per square foot, as I recall, was like $338, which was, they were averaging near $500. Quality, it was in Kapolei, right outside of Honolulu Airport, so it had to have a pretty strong STC for noise from aircraft, pretty much a concrete structure, and they were just blown away with quality, schedule, and the cost. So a true project that I was probably as proud as any to be involved with, because they got their people trained. I said you need to get your key people on board to know how to both award and administer this contract. So that was my to the date, probably the best one.
I read about that school in Hawaii. So congratulations, Mike.
That's a great story. Mine's not going to be as broad as that. So a lot of the things that I try to do, look, when you come to it as a lawyer, people say frequently, we want you to focus just on what that contract looks like, right? And you sort of get put in a box. Since I become a consultant, it's a little bit different than that, but sometimes not quite. So one of the first assignments that I had as a consultant was Southern Nevada Water and the Lake Mead project. It's basically a very complex project. I think we've had a couple of presentations at our different conferences on it, but it's a 3-mile tunnel under Lake Mead to provide water to Las Vegas because Lake Mead was dropping. So this was the Southern Nevada Water Authority had done one design build project and it was done poorly. But they determined that they considered construction management at risk, but they ultimately decided on design build because they wanted single point of responsibility. But along the way, and so part of my role there, even though I was hired as a lawyer, part of my role was, all right, teach us some practices, right? Or give us some ideas that you think could work. And this was in conjunction with other people. It wasn't just me. But among the things we talked about is the split between price and technical. And that project, we had an incredible leader. The project and the chief engineer for Southern Nevada Water is Mark Jensen. It was just an amazing guy, incredible leader. But so he viewed this project as being so important that what the convention always was more price than, even though it's against our best practices, right? More price than dollars, than technical. So 65% technical, 35% price. Part of that was we had a short list and all that, but part of it was he said, I want to make sure that the team, this is so important. If this project, something goes wrong, yeah, we got a contract to protect us, but we're in this together, we're partners. So if that thing busts in the middle of, the middle of the tunnel, I'm into this. So I want to make sure I've got a great process. So he handled the procurement extremely well, and we got a great team. But then ultimately, we wound up having the challenge that is always there, which is how do you deal with the owner control? And the fact that here you have a bunch of engineers that truly want to be on our side, our engineer one, that know what they want and want it specified, and when they get something from the engineer from the contracting side, says, well, that's not good enough. And so we were tested on that very early when there was an issue of factor of safety, and it was a factor of safety basically of a temporary structure, but bottom line was that the design builder team said it should be 2, and the engineers for the owner said it should be 3.
Okay.
Huge cost difference. And they simply cannot resolve it. So Mark just stepped in and he said, listen, guys, I just want you to think about this for a second. Do we really think that their engineers are looking for failure? Do you really think that their engineers are looking at this and saying that we'll be able to say we met the standard of care, but ultimately it's not our fault? They really believe that this is right. They're the engineer of record. So if you feel strongly about it, wanting 3, then that's okay. We're going to have a change order to them, and we'll pay them for the additional costs.
Right.
But if we do this, then we're now running this, and we're controlling the design, and we're not letting them do their job.
Right.
Make it happen. So set the frame for the project, and they only went with the factor of safety of 2, as you would expect. But then later on, the contractor very much respected what was going on because he could see Mark dealing with our philosophies of partnering, recognizing that they're professionals. We wound up having a blowout right as the starter tunnel came out.
Right.
$40 million claim, which Mark looked at and said, very few owners would do this.
That's right.
Basically said, that's a differing site condition. We're going to settle it. We paid it and then dealt with insurance on it, as opposed to fighting about whether or not the design was right.
Right.
So I look at the success stories that I see, they're the metrics that really work and sort of prove how schedule, price, and all that plays out. But it's when you see somebody change their perspective and truly act as if trust makes a difference, as if being a good partner makes a difference, when that's not really been their nature because of design bid build. It's very rewarding. And so I always loved that project.
Yeah, it seems like a simple concept. We've talked about a tagline, one team, one goal, and talking about the role of an owner's consultant in design build. Craig, you're on that task force. And we teach about trust and respect. And those are concepts we we learn early in our life in kindergarten. Why do so many people have trouble with those concepts? It seems to me those can oftentimes be more problematic than the technical side of things, the contract, the people skills, the mental shift in design build. Why is that so hard? You want to take that one, Craig?
In one word, greed. Usually, it's been my experience that the undesirable behavior in design bid build was driven on a low bid, and quite frankly, a lot of contractors won by finding holes, gaps, errors, omissions, and hoping to make it back on change orders, and I just feel it created an adversarial relationship. If there's one thing that I think is critical about design build is that direct contractual relationship between the designer and the builder, and as Mike mentioned, and the key trade partners engaged early on. But and a question you asked earlier, some of the challenges or frustrations, and I've mentioned about owners really understanding how critical the collaboration team is. The other one, and what made me think of was what Mike's comment is that it's now. As I said earlier, if they'll do 10 DBIA or 8 or 9, I'm happy. One of the 10th ones, it seems to be a challenge, and it's as an owner representing owners for 30 years, it's perplexing that more owners can't understand how critical it is. Since in design build you're going to award a contract with most of the design yet to be completed, and to have a seat at the table and a voice at that table, having some kind of a monetary, and again, with DBIA's owner series that Dinah Hall developed for you over the years. I think it's great because, quite frankly, we'll do a lot of training for DBIA, and he says, well, you convinced me that we ought to do this, now show me how. And I think that course where we spent a full day on source selection, selecting the right design build team. We spent a full day or day and a half on transition performance requirements. And then the third day is trying to fully make owners understand that is an incredible option for them to reward superior performance and collaboration during the performance-based contract.
Right. You want to add to that? It looks like you want to add to that.
I do,
okay.
Because he started with a single word and agreed, and I would agree with that. But I also would put two other words in: ego and habit. So when you sort of look at, when I went through engineering school, I knew if I stayed as an engineer, I knew who I was working with. It wasn't the contractor. Right. And so much of this generation, right, has basically had, the client as being the owner if you're an engineer or professional. And having a direct access to the decision maker is always a lot easier than it is if you're now sometimes part of a team that's got competing challenges and balancing, things that the owner might consider. So I think habits are being broken as we now see more and more people use design build. And the ego part, I think, has been a struggle regardless of where you are. People human nature tends to support that we are right in our beliefs, and it's very hard to be able to see that there might be an alternative. The 2-factor safety versus 3. Right? Those are really smart engineers, and they each had their perspective, but their ego was forcing them to sort of stay in that mode. And
we've talked about education. You both brought up education. You were just talking about the owner series earlier. I think you mentioned design build done right, and you both have been instrumental in the development of our best practices around design build done right principles and educating owners. Do you think DBIA's education has made a difference in the industry? Have we started to get our message out there and reach people, and are people understanding more the value and the benefits inherent in design build?
I think it's the single biggest contribution DBIA makes to the industry I know we have publications and documents and conferences, but I think the education is the absolute, from a member, from again representing agencies, owners. I think it has been vital to advancing design build done right.
Okay.
Proof's in the pudding. People keep wanting to come and take the classes, and it's not just to get certification, but it's really to have people trained in some of these issues. And some of these issues are the hard ones. The ones that I think that we can do well in, once we start getting away from some of the more mechanical issues that you need to have as a background, it's how you start dealing with the team building issues and how you put problems before them, and that are in a non-threatening environment that they have to think through. And I do fully agree with Craig. I mean, the instruction manuals that we've developed and the training that we've done along those lines has really been our strongest contribution.
Excellent. I wanted that answer, but I was hoping you came to it on your own.
And those that are listening, Mike is spearheading at this very moment pretty much a total rewrite and updating of the DBIA core curriculum. So I've been pleased to be a part of that. And there was a lot of discussion, a lot of in-depth outreach to designers and contractors and owners and trade partners and pretty much everybody that we could touch to get their feedback into refreshing the courses. So if you haven't been to a DBIA training class in a while, I think those that are, when they see the new courses rolled out, which will be when?
We're looking at April, May.
Okay. I think they're going to be pleased with
I agree.
the new
May
content.
1.
I think so as well. I think that's the beauty of DBIA as an umbrella organization, that all of our materials, education, resources, take in mind all the players in the industry, and that just makes everything better for everyone involved. It helps foster success for all. Well, we're going to have you gentlemen back for round 2 because this has been great, and I'm going to end with one final question for both of you. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary, so make sure you say happy anniversary to us at the end of your answer here. But where do you see the organization going in the next 25 years? You've been here for the first 25. Where do you see us 25 years from now?
Well, you obviously have to continue, we have to continue doing our work in procurement and contracting. That's sort of a staple. But I think that where we're going to wind up having to spend more time and where we will add more value is going to be in this post-award area. And I say that broadly. It's the idea of how we are going to have people live by the principles that design build really is intended for. The idea of collaboration, true integration in terms of thinking, and being able to advance that. And I think there's nobody else that's picking that up, and I think we may wind up doing it in conjunction with, Lean, the Lean Construction Institute or others, right? But that's where it's at. We still have people that struggle to some extent with that, and I think while you're never done with procurement, and you're always trying to make sure that you haven't lost ground that you've gained legislatively. I see that, and largely through the educational platform as being what we're going to wind up doing next in a big way.
Perfect. Craig?
Happy anniversary.
Excellent. Thank you.
Gosh, I mean, trying to look forward, you look back and think, I think building information modeling has really transformed our industry. Who knows what the next technological advance will be, but we're still in the people business. I think DBIA, again, echoing what Mike just said, doing all the hard work and getting the right design build team on board with the right solution within budget is one thing. But when the light turned greens and you issue a notice to proceed, we're not buying a commodity. Every project's unique. Right. The continued ability to me of working on team building and underscoring great people agree to disagree. How important, you mentioned a couple other, I'll mention ADR. I think formal dispute review boards and partnering is money that's well spent, that can avoid. We just happen to work in a very difficult, challenging environment that under the best of circumstances, the best assumptions, there's just going to be, everybody's not going to agree on everything. So I think establishing those rules of engagement during that post-award process are critical, and I hope DBIA can continue to underscore that in all of our training. And before I say happy anniversary, I want to look back. There's a couple moments I thought coming back that I recall in the last 20 plus years. One is the early conferences we had, Chicago or Atlanta, where we had a couple hundred people.
Chicago was my first, yes.
Well, that was the second time we went to Chicago.
Okay.
We went to there well before that. And then when we went to San Diego, and this was the year 2000, we had over 2,000. I mean, that's when I just could not believe DBA's on the map. And we had incredible excitement and momentum, and then a thing called 9/11 occurred, and obviously September 11th, and our conference was scheduled a few weeks later in Boston, your home state, that. Almost everything came to a total
pause in all of our other organizations. DBIA had that conference in Boston, and I remember the hotel, the convention center, they said every single person canceled except DBIA. So I just thought at that moment in time, DBIA kind of stood tall and continued with the mission, and it was I think back on that. The other one I have to mention, we're constantly in these government shutdowns now. This was a kind of a funny one, but and I'll leave the people in the agency nameless because I don't get in trouble. But we had done a DBIA workshop, and we used to then have the exam prep separate, and we do the exam. Well, this was in the midst of a shutdown, so I volunteered, and these high-level government officials I met at a pretty good sized agency. We did the exam prep workshop in my living room with flip charts. And I proctored the exam afterwards, and of course I was having
lunch
a cocktail.
As well?
Yeah, we had lunch, but that was one of those ones. I look back and think that was pretty much a commitment here. Here's government employees that are furloughed or waiting to get back to work, and they drove way up, where I live, about 70 miles up in the mid-Maryland. So anyhow, happy anniversary, 25th year to DBIA.
In fairness to you, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I'm never
leave it to Craig.
All right. Got it.
Well, thank you both for traveling to DBIA headquarters here in D.C., and I look forward to many more years working with you. You guys have been instrumental in the organization's success, so thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If what's past really is prologue, then we're looking at a terrific future for the design-build industry. Are you ready for it? DBIA can help. Did you know this month is one of the design-build events of the year, where thousands of owners, practitioners, exhibitors, and more gather for 2 conferences in one location. First, design builders in the water sector will meet in Portland, Oregon on March 19th through 21st for a conference jam-packed with workshops, networking, and education. Right after that, the transportation sector follows on the 21st through the 23rd with another impressive program. Registration is open now. Just go to dbia.org/conferences.